Patience is one of those words people love to admire but hate to practice. Everyone says patience is a virtue, but in the modern world, patience feels like a weakness. People believe that speed equals intelligence, that reacting fast means thinking well. But the truth is almost always the opposite. The faster your reaction, the lower your reflection. Impulses live in the shallow end of the mind. Wisdom waits in the deep end. You can't reach it if you're splashing around chasing every ripple. And it takes patience compounds. In life, it transforms. Almost every major mistake I've seen, financial or personal, came from impatience disguised as urgency. People feel time slipping and start making moves they don't understand just to feel in control. But action for the sake of action is just panic, wearing ambition's clothes. The disciplined mind knows when to act and when to wait. Knowing when to wait takes more strength than any bold move you could make. When Warren and I made investment decisions, we never rushed. We could sit on a pile of cash for years if the conditions didn't make sense. People thought we were lazy or timid, but the truth was simpler. We refused to be forced into stupidity by boredom. The world keeps whispering in your ear. Do something, don't just sit there. But sometimes the best move is exactly that, sit there. Let the impatience of others become your advantage. The world rewards those who can wait while everyone else reacts. That's why the impatient rarely get rich. They spend their compounding before it matures. The same principle applies to relationships, careers, even health. The things that matter most take the longest to grow, but the modern brain, trained by notifications and instant rewards, can't handle delayed gratification. It wants the dopamine hit now, and that craving for immediacy is the silent killer of long-term success. Every I live, I realize more clearly time either compounds for you or against you. Your habits, your choices, your emotions, they all collect interest. A moment of anger compounds into years of regret. A moment of restraint compounds into peace. It's all arithmetic, just not the kind they teach in school. Most people underestimate how much damage or benefit small daily behavior can cause over decades. They want results, but they ignore processes. The truth is, results are just processes compounded. Let me tell you something about emotions. The market doesn't beat you. Your emotions do. The same is true in life. Fear and greed are the oldest partners in human history. They dance together in cycles, each one feeding the other. When fear rises, people sell. When greed returns, they buy too late, over and over again. The pattern hasn't changed in 100 years because people haven't changed. They read the same news, feel the same panic, make the same irrational moves, and then blame the system. What they don't see is the system is neutral, that it's human nature that's volatile. That's why I always said the first rule of compounding is never interrupt it unnecessarily. The second rule is never let your emotions do the interrupting. Emotional discipline is like oxygen. You don't notice it until it's gone. When your emotions control you, reason leaves the room. And once reason leaves, wealth and wisdom follow right behind it. Here's the hard part. Emotional control isn't about suppression. It's about awareness. Most people think controlling emotion means pretending it isn't there. That's foolish. Suppressed emotion leaks out later, often odder and dumber. Control means noticing the feeling and choosing not to obey it. It means saying, I'm angry, but I won't act on it. That's strength. That's how you build a mind that doesn't sabotage itself every time the world shakes. In your 20s, you can afford emotional mistakes. You can afford to chase, to react, to gamble a bit. But in your 50s and beyond, your emotional capital is as precious as your financial one. Each impulsive reaction costs time and energy you can't get back. You must treat your composure like an investment portfolio, protect it, grow it, and never let it be borrowed by someone else's chaos. I've seen men lose everything, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they couldn't stay calm They let one insult, one rumor, one downturn push them into a spiral. They started arguing with the world instead of adapting to it. That's a fight you can't win. The world doesn't bend to your mood. It doesn't reward outrage. It rewards composure. The calmer you are, the longer your edge lasts. If you think about it, the entire art of wise living is emotional arbitrage. You buy calm when others are selling it. You stay patient when others are panicking. You trade short-term excitement for long-term compounding. That's how you quietly outperform most of humanity, by refusing to play their emotional games. Well, of course, this isn't glamorous. There's nothing dramatic about being calm. Nobody writes headlines about the man who simply didn't panic. But that's exactly where the real power hides, in silence, and they're tight, in delayed reaction. Most people lose their advantage because they need to feel in control every moment. But control isn't about constant motion. It's about selective action. You control your future by refusing to be dragged around by every impulse of the present. Let me put it this way. Imagine your life as a snowball rolling down a hill. The longer it rolls undisturbed, the larger it grows. But every emotional outburst, every impulsive detour, every panic-driven decision is a hand that reaches out and crushes it mid-roll. You don't lose compounding because the hill was too small. You lose it because you couldn't keep your hands off the snowball. And so when I speak about patience, I'm not talking about passivity. Patience isn't doing nothing. It's doing the right thing long enough to see the result. It's refusing to abandon a sound strategy just because it hasn't paid off yet. People who can't wait destroy their own advantages. The discipline to stay steady when there's no applause. That's what separates wisdom from wishful thinking. In the end, patience is not just a skill, it's a worldview. It's the belief that reality works on its own clock, not yours. The world doesn't rush because you're anxious. Compounding doesn't speed up because you're bored. Everything valuable unfolds at the pace of nature, not the pace of desire. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner life stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like a partnership. Most people spend their entire lives chasing complexity because simplicity feels too plain to be valuable. They think truth must be hidden, that wisdom must sound poetic. But the best ideas in life are always brutally simple. So in fact, that the mind rejects them out of arrogance. It can't believe something so clear could be so powerful. That's why most people never change. They keep looking for a complicated answer when the simple one has been waiting the whole time. Simplicity is clarity in disguise. It's the moment when your decisions stop needing decoration. You stop justifying, stop defending, stop explaining to everyone why you're doing what you're doing. You simply do it because it makes sense. The crowd doesn't like that. The crowd lives on confusion. They need noise to feel alive. But the calm mind doesn't need validation, it needs alignment. And once you have that, you move through life differently. You stop rushing and you start understanding. The world today rewards immediacy. Everything screams for your attention. Every notification, every opinion, every opportunity feels urgent. But the faster you move, the less you see. Modern life runs on distraction. It thrives on keeping you reacting instead of reflecting. That's why focus is the new scarcity. Everyone has access to information, but very few have access to their own attention. If you can learn to guard it, you're already ahead of 99% of people. I've always said the ability to ignore is more valuable than the ability to absorb. The world measures intelligence by how much you know. I measure it by how much nonsense you can filter out. Every bit useless information that clutters your mind weakens your judgment. It steals the space where wisdom should grow. Learn to close the mental tabs. Learn to disconnect. You'll be shocked how much clearer life looks when you stop reacting to every signal the world sends you. Clarity demands silence. That's why few people find it, they can't stand to be alone with their own thoughts. They drown their discomfort in noise and endless conversation and consumption. But silence isn't empty. It's full of answers that only appear when you stop searching for them. Every great insight I've had came during quiet hours, no screens, no charts, no crowd, just thought. And thought, when repeated long enough, becomes vision. The irony is that most people mistake movement for progress. They confuse being busy with being effective. But the most powerful people I've ever met are deliberate. They move slowly, speak rarely, and think deeply. Their minds aren't crowded. They've edited their lives to the essentials, so every decision carries weight. That's not laziness, that's mastery. You can't master anything when your attention is scattered in 1,000 directions. Modern culture teaches the opposite. It glorifies multitasking, distraction, endless productivity. But productivity without purpose is just sophisticated procrastination. You're not getting closer to wisdom, you're just running in circles faster. The goal isn't to do more, it's to need less approval, less stimulation, less noise. Because the less you need, the freer you become. Freedom, you see, is a negative definition. It's not what you gain, it's what you remove. You don't reach peace by adding more into your life. You reach it by subtracting what isn't belong. Freedom from envy, freedom from debt, freedom from obligation to impress. Once you start cutting those out, you realize peace was never something to chase, it was something to uncover. People make life harder than it needs to be because chaos gives them an excuse. It lets them blame complexity for their lack of progress. It's not my fault, they say. It's just politic. But most of the time it isn't complicated, it's uncomfortable. The truth is simple, but it hurts your ego. So instead of facing it, you build theories around it. You intellectualize your weaknesses until they look like virtues. That's how people stay trapped for decades. The antidote to that trap is brutal honesty. Not the kind you use to criticize others, but the kind you use on yourself when nobody's watching. Ask simple questions. What am I pretending not to know? What am I avoiding because it would make me change? Those are the questions that carve wisdom into your bones. You can't think clearly while lying to yourself. The mind can't build structure on denial. I have often said the goal of life is not to be brilliant, it's to avoid stupidity. Avoiding stupidity takes honesty. It takes humility to admit you don't know something, and even more humility admit that you were wrong. But humility compounds faster than arrogance ever could. Every time you admit an error, you earn a small dividend of clarity. Every time you deny one, you pay interest in confusion. That's why I've always been suspicious of people who never change their minds. They mistake stubbornness for strength. But the ability to revise your beliefs is the real sign of intelligence. The world changes, facts fold, mistakes reveal themselves. If you can't adapt, your past decisions become your prison. Rigidity might look like confidence, but it's just fear in disguise, the fear of being seen learning. You have to learn how to think, not what to think. The world will always try to sell you opinions, ready-made. Every ideology, every movement, every trend is just someone else's thought waiting to rent space in your head. Guard that space carefully. The most valuable real estate in the world is not in New York or London. It's the few square inches between your ears. Fill it with clarity and your entire life appreciates in value. Here's the strange thing. When you finally start thinking independently, the noise doesn't go away, but it loses power. The world doesn't get quieter. You get calmer. You stop taking everything personally. You stop chasing every argument. You begin to see patterns where others see chaos. That's what wisdom feels like. Not excitement, but serenity. The mind finally stops wrestling with itself, and for the first time, you can actually see. And when you can see clearly, the next decision is never hard. It might be uncomfortable, yes, but not confusing. Confusion belongs to those who haven't yet faced themselves. Once you do, simplicity isn't something you practice. It becomes your natural state. And in that state, life stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts feeling like a truth to live. People like to think the road to success is about brilliance. It isn't. It's about clarity, about removing the fog that distorts your decisions. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they can't see straight through their own emotions. The world rewards clarity far more than cleverness. Cleverness may get you applause, but clarity lets you sleep at night. I've spent a lifetime watching people chase shortcuts, trends, and miracles that don't exist. They read one new book and think they've discovered wisdom. They hear one market prediction and think they've found certainty. But wisdom isn't collected like stamps. It's carved slowly, one quiet realization at a time, one painful mistake after another. The price of clarity is always discomfort. That's why so few people buy it. The truth is, human behavior hasn't changed in 1,000 years. Greed still dresses up as ambition. Fear still hides behind caution. And envy still ruins more people than poverty ever could. The patterns are timeless. What changes is only the scenery. New markets, new tools, new distractions. The human mind stays the same, emotional, impatient, and easily deceived by its own storytelling. If you want to live a rational life, start by noticing how often you lie to yourself. You'll be shocked. You rationalize every bad decision. You dress it up as opportunity. You convince yourself you're being brave when you're just being reckless. The mind is a master negotiator, always ready to justify whatever the heart desires. That's why self-awareness is the rarest form of intelligence. Most people would rather be comfortable than correct. I learned early that you can't fix what you refuse to measure. If you don't measure your thinking, your habits, your errors, you'll repeat them forever. I kept journals, notes, endless reflections, not because I enjoyed writing, but because I feared self-deception more than embarrassment. Writing keeps your thoughts honest. When you put them on paper, you see the illusions you live by. That's how you start the slow process of rational living, by becoming your own critic before the world has to do it for you. Rationality isn't natural. It's a muscle. You have to train it, stretch it, test it. Most people don't like the training because it feels boring. They prefer excitement to reason, moment to reflection. But wisdom grows in stillness, not in noise. You can't hear good ideas while you're running toward the next one. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to stop and think longer than your competitors can tolerate. When I was young, I made a habit of asking myself a simple question whenever I faced a decision. And then what? It sounds childish, but it saved me countless disasters. Every action creates a chain reaction. Most people see only the first link, the thrill, the profit, the applause. They never ask about the second or third link, where the real cost hides. Thinking one step ahead makes you look smart. Thinking 3 steps ahead makes you look lucky. But luck is just foresight disguised as coincidence. Warren and I spent decades practicing the art of thinking slowly. While the world celebrated speed, we studied patience. While others tried to predict the next quarter, we tried to understand the next decade. That's the difference between activity and progress. The market rewards motion in the short term. The time rewards restraint in the long term. People mock slowness until it compounds. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be the most consistent. Consistency is the quiet twin of genius. It doesn't get attention, but it builds empires. Every great investor, builder, or thinker you admire has one trait in common: endurance. They stay rational longer than the crowd can stay excited. That's what compounding really is. Rationality sustained over time. The world loves stories of sudden success. Overnight millionaires, viral fame, quick wins. But behind every quiet fortune lies decades of patience. Nobody writes headlines about restraint because restraint doesn't make noise. Yet restraint is the foundation of every form of freedom: financial freedom, mental freedom, emotional freedom. All of them are built on the same principle: wanting less than you can afford. You'll notice something when you start practicing rational living. Your circle gets smaller. You lose interest in gossip and outrage and spectacle. You stop needing to prove you're right and start caring more about whether you are right. You stop chasing recognition because the quiet satisfaction of good judgment feels richer than applause ever did. That's when you realize how few people actually think. Most just react, and then defend their reactions as philosophy. Every mistake I've ever made came from a moment of unexamined emotion: pride, fear, greed. Every good decision came from calm. The older you get, the clearer the equation becomes. Emotion distorts, patience clarifies. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, that's impossible, but to prevent it from making decisions for you. That's what rationality truly means, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. You can't control the market. You can't control other people. You can't control luck, but you can always control your reaction. That's where real power lives. Control your reaction and the world stops controlling you. It's not easy. It never gets easy, but it's the only path that leads somewhere worth going. The mind is a powerful ally when trained and a ruthless enemy when ignored. Every day you choose which one it will be. The choice looks small, but it compounds quietly into wisdom or into regret. And the strangest part is you'll never see the difference day to day. But one morning you'll wake up and realize you're not chasing noise anymore. You're building signal. That's when you know you're finally living rationally.